Hey guys, it's Barrett with the Gimpy Camper. So thanks for joining this week's video. This is another one of our truck series videos, and this is going to be specifically about the roof rack that I went with. Now, I really liked the Prinsu roof racks and the Sherpa roof racks and those lower profile roof racks. That's kind of what I was going for. But I was trying to be somewhat conservative with the budget because it's already breaking the bank. But after I bought this, it really went through the roof. But I was trying to find one on Amazon. So the issue, and I was trying to find one that wasn't as expensive but had a different look. I didn't want that same old look, just like the tube basket. Okay, so I wanted something a little bit different. So I was looking at Amazon trying to find, my options here, because a lot of these like Prinsus and stuff, they were like $1,000, $800,000, somewhere in there, and I really didn't want to spend that. So I found this Armbordillo, and it's called the AR-M roof rack. Now I think they make these mainly for Jeeps. It did come up and say that it would fit my truck. However, it said that the mounting hardware was not compatible with my truck. So I'd watched a few different YouTube videos on like how they were mounting these other roof racks and stuff, and I was pretty confident that I could, kind of make it work in essence. So what I decided to do, because the one that I ordered, now I'm going to put a link to the Amazon down here, but I think they're usually like $800, and the one that I ordered, for some reason it said like $300 or $350, somewhere in there. And I was like, I don't know what's happening here, but I think it's a mistake. I'm gonna like put an order in, see if it goes through before I change my mind again. So what I ended up doing is I put that order in. I did look at the dimensions, and I took a tape measure out to the truck, and it looked like it would fit pretty well. So I just went with it. So I put that order in, it came. I will say that when it was delivered and I was looking at it, I was pretty impressed with like how the packaging was. Like they used like foam wrapping around a lot of things, and overall it was in really good shape when it came. Didn't have a lot of issues with it. I will say that some of the issues on the inside of the roof rack, you could tell was a little bit flaky. So I was already going to be going over the bumpers, and I thought, well, I would go over the bumpers. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the roof rack, even though it's brand new, with some of that Raptor liner too, kind of mesh it in a little bit better. So that's what we did. So number one, we had to put it together first. Now, I will say that this is where I stopped having so much faith in it, because when you're putting it together, there's a lot of intricate angles and stuff here, and due to those angles, that causes some issues. So the biggest issue that I had, like putting the main cage together, was on the front, because it makes this cone. Well, it also like 45s and takes the corners off there. Well, wherever it does that, you're supposed to put a nut and a bolt like at the top part and at the bottom part. Well, because of the way those angles are there, and there's a little piece of like a metal flap coming off of both sides that meet together that you're trying to bolt together. But because of those angles, there's no way to get that bolt in that hole to start with. So what I ended up doing was using a self-tapping screw for that front bolt. And I think I put a couple in both sides right there in that same flap. And then I had the bolt in the area where you could reach it. So I think that's going to be fine and not cause any issue. And then we got the back bolted together as well, and then it comes with a lot of cross members, and you go through and you just bolt all those cross members down, and that's pretty much in essence your whole roof rack. And then comes the issue of like the mounting hardware. So the mounting hardware that came with it, number one, I think it's made to more kind of clamp over the side of like a Jeep top or something like that. But I figured out by using most of the pieces that came with it, I could make it work on my truck. And I decided what I was going to do is mount it essentially like they do the Prinsus and stuff. And I was going to cut a little bit of the rubber molding out of the top of the roof, and then use some riv nuts in order to screw the rack down to the roof. which all went well until I had issues with that, which we'll get into in a minute. But all in all, like for the fit and finish, I would say that I thought it was going to be lower profile than it is, but all in all, I'm happy with it. I was really wanting, like I say, to be like a couple inches shorter and hug the roof a little bit more, but you know, I think it looks good. I was kind of back and forth on it a little bit, but I've had, I don't know how many people on social media ask me what kind of roof rack it was and where they could get it because they really like it. Now my truck in general is very polar. Either people like really love it and think it's cool, or they say like you run the truck. So that's just the way it is whenever you do big projects like this. And all the car guys that like their waxed vehicles and stuff, they really don't like you doing Raptor liner over the paint and say that you're just ruining the value of your truck and this and that and the other. But that's the way it goes. So let's fast forward a little bit and start talking about these mounts. Now, the mounts, after looking at them, like I say, the way that they were from the factory, I didn't feel like I could use the riv nuts and mount them down. But I felt like if we extended those legs out on both sides, then I could have a good option in order to do that. And so I actually have a little bit of a little bitty welder now. I've not used it yet. I'm still working into that. But I went to my local neighborhood Shelburne RV, where my friend Steve down there, who also has his own YouTube channel. Be sure to check that out. The link's also down in the description. But he helped me out and cut a couple of pieces of metal that were just wide enough to fit in the rain gutter on the roof. And then we welded those up to the factory mounts. And then all I had to do was bend that factory mount to the angle that I needed, which wasn't too big of an issue at all. So after we got that done, I did go up on the roof and I cut out where I thought the mount should be. And so we did like a dry fit first, just to kind of say like it should be probably about here and about here. Because with the contours of the roof and everything, that's something else that you got to think about. But I cut that rubber gutter out, and then what we did is I had a hole drilled in each side of that basically ski that we put on the bottom of that, and that's where we was going to riv nut it. And so I took a marker and I marked where those holes should be. And for 3 out of 4 of these, that went just fine. Drilled a hole right in the rain gutter on both of those spots, which is just like they do with these expensive ones, expensive roof racks. Did fine. Used the riv nut machine. That took me a minute to figure out how to get those to expand and work well there, but I figured it out until I got to the driver's side. Now the driver's side, I had an issue because I was drilling a hole in that gutter. Again, same thing they tell you to do with the expensive roof racks, but it caught the edge of a piece of metal there and started rolling a piece of metal up out of that gutter. And so that caused me issues. I was trying to like form it back down where it was and tried to put a riv nut in there, and it wouldn't hold. It kept popping out. I didn't want something to pop out going down the road. So I actually ended up having to move that mount a couple of inches. It's either forward or backward, I don't even remember right now, and do 2 more holes, which I really didn't like doing because I really don't like having holes in my roof, much less extra holes that I didn't need. But what I did do is I went back and I got some Bondo fiberglass and I filled those initial holes in. So I did all that, and then I screwed all those mounts down to the riv nuts. When I put those in, I did put some Chem Link clear around the bolt and around all the riv nut and everything, and put those down in there. Now I will say that I found evidence recently of there being a little bit of a water leak in that front mount, which is where I had the issue. So I got to go seal that up a little bit better. But all in all, this has worked okay so far. Now what I decided to do, because the way these mounts are, is it was one piece of metal on the bottom and then it's got like a cover plate on top of it. So what I did is I left those mounts on there, and then whenever I painted the truck, I did the epoxy primer and the green. I just went ahead and painted those green And my thought was I could just put that black cap on at the end and that'd take care of it. But I ended up, whenever I did the black stripe at the bottom, I taped everything off and I just went over those legs with a little bit of black because it made my OCD feel a little better. Nobody probably would have noticed it, but I just like it better. Now, in order to actually mount it, I was again having issues because it's not made for this truck. And so the mounts where I put them, they didn't line up with where it would attach to the rack really well. But what I ended up doing is I got 2 pieces of unistrut and I cut them to length, like front to back, and then I painted them black before I mounted them up. And then I bolted the unistrut to the mounts that were on the roof, just from the front to the back on both sides, so they were parallel with the truck. Now, I will say that I didn't have a lot of faith in this mounting system up to this point because it still seemed pretty wobbly and I didn't like it a whole lot. But after I got the roof rack up there and I put the bolts in that held the roof rack to the unistrut, and that gave that cross body tie-in together there, now everything seems like it's held down really well and I like it. Now we're going to get into wiring this stuff a little bit separately and we're going to go over that later. But as far as right now, I'm just going to go over the accessories that I have on the roof rack. Just kind of give you a list of things. And again, all of these like electrical accessories are going through wire hiders on the windshield, and then most of them are controlled by an aux beam panel, but the Harbor Freight lights I did mount with the Harbor Freight factory wiring harness because I didn't want to mess that up. So, but most everything goes to the aux beam panel, which we're going to have a whole video on that one separately. Now, as far as our accessories, number one, I have 2 utility boxes up there. Now, those utility boxes, they weren't really necessary. I just put them up there because number one, I had the space. And what else am I going to put up there? So my thought was I would like one up there. That way all of the stuff that I usually keep under the seat of my truck that I might need once every couple of years, that can go in that box on the roof and I don't have to worry about it. And then I have more space inside the truck if I actually need something that I'm going to be using. Now the other one, it was empty for a little bit, but during our road trip to Texas where we had an issue with 2 trailer springs breaking at the same time that were only like 18 months old. And there's a whole video about that if you're interested. But due to that, and I had to stop and buy some wood for blocking, and I had to buy a jack, and I had to buy jack stands and all that stuff. So now in the other one there's wood blocking, and then there's 2 jack stands and also an extra spring for the camper. And so that gives me some extra storage there. So that way if something happens again, I don't have to go do the same thing I did last time and buy all that stuff again. Now in between those toolboxes is a Horn Blaster's horn. It's actually a system that has 4 horns built together. And that was really hard to mount because you had the screws were really small and it's really hard to get up in there on those. Those cross members are kind of like unistrut, but not. They're like hollow in the middle, so you got to get your fat fingers up there to get those tight. I really wish I would have moved it over a little bit because I had an issue when I was running the airline and stuff. But that air horn is again controlled by the aux beam panel, which we'll get into in a little bit. And let me tell you, that thing's pretty loud. I was on the interstate without the camper. Really, the reason that I wanted that air horn is because when I'm driving down the road, especially in big cities like Atlanta where people like to just get right in front of you and cut you off, I like having a little like, hey, I blow my horn and like, you shouldn't be doing that. Well, this is like taking that to the next level. So instead of like blowing my horn, I blow my air horn. Now, I was driving through Knoxville last month and this semi started to cut me off. I only had just like 4 or 5 feet and I didn't have the trailer then, but I hit the button for the air horn, gave it like a 4-second burst. And that guy was so confused, he didn't know what to do. He's like, I'm gonna get back over in my lane. Anyway, I had that happen a couple of times. Once I felt bad because I hit the air horn and this little car cut me off when I was in the camper and was on our first trip. And I think they about hit the ditch because it was it scared them. They swerved, and but don't be cutting people off and doing things that aren't safe. You know, use your head when you drive, people. But in any instance, let's keep going with the accessories here. So I had bought a kit from Nylite, which I really like Nylite. I do have some Nylite stuff, and the running lights that I have on the bottom of the truck are Nylite, which we'll get to eventually. But I bought a Nylite kit that had like pods and a light bar. And I had that light bar, it's a 22-inch light bar, because that's a 22-inch light bar opening in the back of the Armbordillo cargo rack. Well, it didn't, the way that mounted, it didn't mount very well, because they mount like on the bottom of the, or top of the light rack and not on the ends. And so I finally got it on there. It took me forever, and I couldn't get it to work. Now, the reason I couldn't get it to work is because there was an issue with my switch panel, which we'll get into in the other video. But I thought it might have been the light, so I swapped the light out. So I actually have a Harbor Freight light in there. Now, it still didn't fit great. I thought it was going to mount right up, because it does mount up with bolts on the ends where you just tighten them down. And that's what that had brackets for, but those brackets were too narrow, so I had to deform them a little bit and drill them out a little bit, and still kind of really teeter with it to get that in there. I like it better, but the main reason that I like it better is because it's got the black background on it, so it blends in a little bit better. And just above that, because I'm an RV guy and I have awesome sponsors like Halo View, I had an extra Halo View camera. And so I thought, I can put this camera up on the top of this, above this light, and that way it acts as like a cargo camera, because I don't have one of these fancy new trucks that has a cargo camera. So I ended up taking a piece of metal. First I made a bracket out of magnets. That didn't work out too well. Felt like it would just fall off going down the road. So I got a piece of angle iron that was pretty big, and I mounted the camera to that, and that I really wasn't sure how good it was going to do for like hooking up the camper, but I just recently changed to the Gen Y gooseneck hitch as well, which I really love. And on the very bottom of the screen, you can just barely see the ball, but you can see it. So that made that issue a lot easier for me, because a lot of people with that hitch have trouble lining it up and getting it hooked up. So I'm really happy with that, and I'm glad I did that, because now the screen that's always on in there, but I don't have a camera hooked up to it because I don't have the camper, I can actually see it. And so like I can have something playing in there, and the screen looks a lot better than my backup camera, which is older because it's more pixelated, but it still doesn't work well for like the backup camera, but it does let you see a little bit more of what's going on around, plus what's in the bed. Now on the sides, there's cutouts for light pods. And again, I bought that kit, and I was going to put that Nylite light pods in there that were like 3.5 inches. I thought I could make it fit, but the way that the tabs are made in there, I couldn't get those Nylite pods to work. So I actually ordered some actual square that were like more of a slimline Nylite, which are marketed more for like motorcycles and stuff. But I ordered those. They're still a tight fit, and you can't adjust them all that well, but they fit in there, and I got them situated for what I need, and they're working out good. So I'm really happy with those. And then on the front, there's also cutouts for those little lights, but I had to draw the line there because I didn't really need them, because I did mount the 4 Harbor Freight edge lights, which are the 4-light versions. I have 2 that are floodlights and 2 that are spotlights, and they're wired in pairs. And so that's the last accessory that I have on there. Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not, because I was in O'Reilly getting something else, because whenever you're doing a big project like this, you end up going to bunches of stores and spending a bunch of money. And I got bedazzled with some strobe lights that they had on the shelf that had the little try me button. And so obviously I had to hit the try me button, and I was like, it'd be kind of nice if I had some strobe lights on this for like emergency situations. And so somehow I ended up with 4 strobe lights too. Actually I got like 2 linear, like 4-inch pods that I mounted to the back. Actually I had drilled a hole to mount them, And then I decided to use that same tape, the Gorilla Extreme tape that I use for the badges. I used that to mount those lights just to the cargo rack. And then in the front I did the same thing. The front ones are like two little mini circular pods on each side though. But that worked out well. The problem was the wiring on those, which, you know, they come with like a little electronic box and I didn't want it to mess up, and so it took a lot of time and actually have those little electronic boxes in a weatherproof box. So hopefully they'll last a while. But that's all for the accessories. So, you know, we'll talk more about the wiring and stuff coming up, but thanks guys for, you know, watching this video. Thanks for being part of the family, and we'll catch you next week.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.